Do people in Alberta that are upset about the federal government, do they have a point? Are there legitimate grievances?
It kind of comes down to the fact that there is this sort of central contradiction in Canada and Canadian history. And you mentioned, the 13 different economies, and I think that's really true. There's not really a national economy, and historically, what was considered the best national policy was what was in the best interest of the industries in Ontario and Quebec. And that quite often was to the detriment of the more resource-based economies in the western provinces and the Atlantic provinces, actually. And so from the perspective of Alberta, from the prairie provinces, there's a whole bunch of different grievances here. But the first one right away is this sentiment that, it doesn't matter what we vote, the election is decided by the time the polls close in Toronto. And there is just a truth to that.
That's true. I remember watching the elections when I was in the Yukon, and it was like, oh, election's over.
Yeah, it's over. And 60% of the population lives in Ontario and Quebec. So of course, those two provinces are going to have a massive role in the outcome of elections, right? And when you're out in Alberta, Ottawa, Toronto, these are a couple thousand kilometers away. Might as well be another world, right? And so really, people sort of perceive Ottawa as it's this faraway place that just imposes taxes and red tape. There's no real connection with that part of the country, or the history in that part of the country. Mm-hmm. There's also very specific historical things that have happened, like in the 1980s during the global economic crisis and the rapid rise in oil prices. The government of Pierre Trudeau implemented the National Energy Program, which set capped prices on Alberta oil. It set an export tax on Alberta oil. And so the Alberta oil barons weren't able to sell their oil on world markets. They had to sell it internally at steeply discounted prices to the industries in Ontario and Quebec. So there was this feeling that, wealth from the oil industry in Alberta was being siphoned off to the benefit of the capitalists in Ontario and Quebec. And for the workers, the National Energy Program meant a real downturn in oil production. Unemployment shot up from something like 3 or 4% in 1980, 1981 to almost 15% by 1983, 1984. So for the working class, they see any sort of imposition on the oil industry, such as carbon taxes today or environmental regulations today, they see these as a threat to jobs, to their livelihoods. And this is where that sort of resentment of even the working class in Alberta, that's where it comes from, is these sort of threats to their jobs and livelihoods.